interesting question that you posed the other day. I thought it would be much, especially trying to do it with my fingers on that. I really don't like texting. I do it because it's in the world that we're living in. But
Right.
overall, I much prefer this. I can see you, I can feel you, and it's much more in depth and easier. So thank you for doing it this way.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you suggested it. And I'd actually had a similar thought and thought that it might be kind of fun just to keep it on record in case there's something fun to share.
But it's fun. It's a great communication tool. I love it.
It really is. And, you know, these conversations, I think are, I don't know, I think this is kind of a rich subject area because things are going to be changing exponentially. They already have. They already have, right? Life as we knew it has got a whole different layer added into it. And, you know, this field is diverse already in terms of how we all come to it through the different schools and practices. And then we bring in distance learning and also distance practice of the work. And you bring in two completely new arenas. I mean, not new for you, because I want to make sure that gets visible and gets seen because this has been out for a while. So not new, but then the conversation starts to get more complex and interesting and layered. Yeah. I just thought it'd be fun to just talk around it.
Yeah, it'd be great. And it's nice to see your face after over 4 years. So
it's been a while. It's been a while, for sure.
I'm in Vietnam, and it's completely different than anywhere I've ever been, and I'm enjoying it. You know, you take yourself wherever you go, and so you get to that point in your life where it's like upeksha. You know, there's equilibrium, and nothing changes that much. The environment may visibly look different, but internally it's pretty much the same for me anyhow at this point.
Yeah, sure, that's the truth. I mean, ultimately, and what I remember about our conversations 4 years ago when we were setting up the training in Hawaii that you gave was just the depth of your inner practice, the depth of your spiritual practice. And that's with you everywhere. And that's really, I think, increasingly, if that's really your path, that becomes the foundation of who you are.
Yeah.
And then where you are is irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah. People think it's strange or they look at me as sort of aghast, but I'm up every morning. Almost every morning, somewhere between 3 and 3:30, 3:40, Spirit just wakes me up and I meditate.
Beautiful.
Start my day that way.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
So you want to talk about, let's just talk about all the kinds of learning that are going on and any kind of questions that you have or that I can answer and bring clarity to. I would love to. You know, it's a great subject. Cranial is an amazing field. It's certainly for me, the most profound journey I've taken as far as its impact on my own well-being and my own spiritual journey. So it's a great place to be.
That is the truth, Judah. I always feel like in a way, it's almost like we sort of stumbled into this realm that really is a meeting point between the physical realm and the spiritual realm, the dynamic intersection. It's sort of a working edge between those two where we actually get to meet in presence, to meet in truth, actually, and find out that that's an active force, good, and for healing that we can bring for each other. So I kind of feel like we're some of the luckiest people on earth, I think, honestly.
Nice to have a good, strong tool that you can cultivate your garden with, beyond just the everyday practice of meditation. You know, it's always been said, can you bring your meditation to your everyday activity? Because it's one thing to meditate, but then if you lose that sense of focus, and I found that the biodynamic approach, I didn't get it so much with the mechanical, that's just my journey. But when I segued to the biodynamic approach, I found the impact was profound on my ability to bring that mindset, that concept of stillness to my everyday life, especially because I was practicing a lot, 4 or 5 hours a day on people. So that absolutely permeated the fabric of my being. And it's stayed moist ever since.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautifully put. Yes, I would agree with all of that. Given that we're recording this just for the fun of it, do you want to just start off a little bit for anyone that may wind up watching this by sharing a little bit about your journey with this work?
With this work. Okay, yeah. I'd be happy to. I started at the Rolf Institute in 1989. And most of my teachers were actually practitioners of cranial as well as visceral. And two of them were teaching. And Charles Swenson, who taught for the Upledger Institute, was my first teacher of craniosacral therapy. And that started my journey. And I had done core zero balancing, but most of the Rolfers had said to me, just do this work, Rolfing, for 4 or 5 years, get a Rolfer's hand, and then move into different forms and add to your cauldron, so to speak. So I lasted about 4.5 years and did core zero balancing, Dr. Smith's work. And then I went with Charles to Fort Collins, and I studied the Upledger's first introductory, the 10-step protocol. And I did that in the second one for about 10 years. And then I was drawn through circumstances to go to England and study with Franklyn for 2 years. I was teaching at a school in Virginia Beach, 2 schools actually, and I had the great fortune and mystifying support by unknown and unforeseen forces that allowed me to go and study with Franklyn every 2 months for 2 years. And that was a game changer. That was 2003 to 2005. And then I practiced that approach. So I've been practicing 1989 to 2003, and then 2 years of that. And so from 2005 until, I would say, even present, because I'm still doing the work, not at the level I was doing before. I'm definitely retired, so to speak. But the practice of the work, 4 or 5 sessions a day, 4 or 5 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less, profoundly impacted my existence. And that it was the most lovely part of the work, is how what I had to become in order to be successful, whatever that means. When I mean successful, what I mean is that I saw changes, profound changes in people that I had been unable to see. And that's nothing against Dr. Upledger's work, because thank God he broke the mold. I will always be thankful for him that non-osteopaths were allowed to study, the secretive work. And so, but the biodynamic approach worked for me, and it worked for me as an individual, how it changed my spirit, my matrix, my liquid crystalline matrix, but also it was more successful approach to healing. And so that brought me up until kind of when we met. And I taught that was my last live class of cranial. I did teach in Thailand, but not cranial. I was teaching Rolfing, and I was about to teach a cranial course in Chiang Mai, and the COVID put the kibosh on that. So I haven't done any live courses since 2 years ago, since COVID. I was supposed to be teaching in China, supposed to be going up every 2 months to Shanghai. This company in Shanghai licensed my videos and all of my entire library and translated into Chinese. And then they wanted me to come and teach in Shanghai. So it was beautiful. I'd fly from Vietnam to Shanghai, teach, work on people, come home or to Vietnam. And but as we've all been affected, COVID has had an impact. So here I am in Vietnam, in a place called Nha Trang, beautiful. And so it's an interesting time to be human on the planet. So that's up to date on who I am. I guess I should say I created that. I guess the important thing that I left out was that after in the 8th class, almost at the end of my training, we watched Franklyn put on a video of a 3D presentation of the cranial bones in movement at the mid-tide, and everyone in the class was stunned. It was just because it was a visual presentation, and the oohs and ahs were like evident everywhere. And because everything else at that time had been Franklyn holding a bone and coming around and showing you the movement of the bone in 3 dimensions and then gone, or the book with arrows. But to see it visually, I was like, wow, it was extremely impactful. And I said, I've got to do something with cranial. And that started the journey. It took about 3 or 4 years. I've forgotten exactly when, or longer, maybe 7 years, to find somebody that was capable of doing it. And I found a younger guy that was a wizard, and he and I became partners. I said, I can't afford to pay you, but here's the journey. and that's a lifelong journey between you and I, and we're 50% partners. You've got the I've got the teaching skill set. I can just roll, and you've got the computer stuff. And it's been a beautiful journey ever since. And Michael is incredible with graphic presentations and just running everything in our company when it comes to computers, and I do the blabbing.
Well, and I have to say, Judah, I don't think anyone has probably even attempted, but certainly not come close to creating, I don't think personally, at least I haven't seen it, hasn't come close to creating anything as extraordinary and as detailed and as beautiful as the graphics combined with the teaching that you put together. I mean, it is, but it's your teaching and inspiration. I think also, I just want to give credit on both sides, because for sure his graphics are stunning. They're unparalleled. But the marriage between the two, between the information and the way that he's interpreted that graphically, I guess I just want to say in this moment, it's like, I think you've created a legacy for this work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think we all appreciate it too. And I hope that just continues to be, increasingly well known. So
yeah. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yeah. And the more people doing cranial on the planet, maybe the faster the planet will heal. I mean, that's a big aha. Oh, I hope so. I would love to get back home and get my hands on horses and do one on horses, because horses love the work. And anyway.
Yeah, they do. I have one here that gets to experience it, and it's beautiful watching how fast they respond.
Yes.
I mean, it's similar to working with infants, right? They just soak it up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're in their world all of a sudden. You're like, wow, here's someone who actually gets me.
Yeah, it's like, welcome to my world. They instantly get it. It's very cool.
They absolutely do.
I would say that's kind of where I'm at today. I'm in Vietnam. I was able to do some sessions almost on a weekly basis to stay a little fresh. I was getting a bit rusty, but with the COVID, but I'm okay with that too. I know eventually, hopefully it'll pass, and then I'll be able to put my hands on people again. I just don't charge anybody anymore. So I don't have a big practice either, but the few that I'm working on now, I don't charge. So it's easy for me to do the work and enjoy myself without any fears of not enough money coming in or whatever that people have when they practice, and they need a sustainable practice. I'm at that point in my journey where that's not important anymore. So
well, you've kind of done those years, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm in my, it's hard to believe this, but it freaks me out a little bit. 31 years I've been doing body work. It's crazy. It's crazy. Wow. Anyway.
It's a pretty beautiful way to go through life though, right?
It's a great way to go through life. I made my money various ways. And when I finally came to being a professional body worker, there was a very large frequency uptick in the quality of my existence. Getting into the healing arts, becoming a healing professional, being involved in the healing world, helping other people at that level. There's a reward. And, I try to tell my students, all my students, of how they come to me. It's like, that's the real reward, is what you're offering to people. And when you make that decision to put on these healing robes, don't worry about anything else, the money, everything else, it'll all, the choice of getting on that path. And you can fall off it 1,000 times, as long as you step back on it 1,000 times. You're doing a great service to the planet. So that's who I am at this, and have always been, as part of the healing journey, which was it was like coming to a fork in a road and being literally gently pushed in that direction. I would have never guessed that I would have become a body worker. Just wasn't in my radar.
I totally hear you. It wasn't in mine either. I sort of got just ushered, and doors open and people show up and opportunities present themselves, and people go, this is what you're meant to be doing, and you start listening to them, and suddenly it's just, you know, like you said, it's a 180, and
Yeah.
Suddenly just
Ushered is a good word. It's
Yeah.
a good word. Yeah.
Beautiful,
Like it.
beautiful. And just for clarity again, because we're recording this, Franklyn is obviously Franklyn Sills, and
Yes.
you are very blessed to have the opportunity to train at the Karuna
Yeah.
Institute in Devon.
Yeah, he's a lovely. I haven't met his wife. I met his other wife. He is a lovely human being. I mean, his Buddhist influence created just his matrix, his energy field. He's a rare human being, and love the dude. And I haven't kept up with him since that, but he's just done an amazing service for the planet, and it's based on who he is. He told me a story about a Burmese meditation master that he had the great karmic ability to meet, and the story. I mean, I didn't even meet the guy, but it brought tears to my eyes just because knowing that people like that exist on the planet. But you know, all his time around the journey of spirituality has impacted him deeply. He's a very soft, very powerful man, and just filled with love. So definitely was a blessing to be able to go there, and it was divine providence that I made it, because at the time I had no money, none, and the training was very expensive, and I lied because I said the money won't be a problem, and it wasn't. It actually, everything worked out miraculous. That was miraculous that what happened. So I was able to study with him. So yes, I am indebted to him. I never met John Upledger, but I spent 2 years on and off with Franklyn, and his books are superb. The videos that I have done, it's based on my training with him and all the notes and all the reading. So it's nothing that I really created. It goes back to Sutherland, but really he was my teacher. So if I were a guitar player or a horseman or a boxer, I would reflect my teacher. So it's a deep reflection of who he is. It's really Franklyn who's speaking through me in many ways. So my hat's off to Franklyn.
That's a beautiful tribute. That really is. That really is, Judah. And I remember that from when we first started corresponding and tuning in as to whether we would be able to put together a training. And I just remember this reflection of humility that you bring, which I really, that was one of the things that really caught my attention in our early communication. And I honor that because, I think it's such a precious gift to bring that clarity of heart into the work as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So.
Oh, it's true. It's basically true. He was the man that was responsible. And there's lots of teachers of this work, but Franklyn is top shelf as a human being.
Right.
And as a teacher, he's superb. And as an author, he's superb. So it's easy for me to spill accolades, about him.
Beautiful.
Anyhow.
Very blessed. So in a way, what you've done then is condensing his teaching, your experience, and this beautiful graphic work into the DVD series.
Yes.
And which brings us round to, I'd love to just have you wrap a little bit, if you're up for that, on, where you see distance learning, or I don't know how you refer to that.
Sure. It is distant. I mean, it's home study distance learning.
Home
right?
study, yeah. How you see that within the field, where you see the pros and cons, and maybe like what would be the perfect way or the best way, the richest way of using this material to springboard into the field of being a practitioner.
That's easy for me because at the time, how I felt about it was, number one, the type of training that I undertook with Franklyn, even in Upledger's work. Every time you fly somewhere, you have this cost, and then you have the hotels and the food, and then you have the cost of the training. So it's not really I don't want to tell you how much I spent. It's easy to find out, but it was, a lot of money in a 2-year period of time. and Franklyn's training in particular had this beautiful manner on the moors. And so that was like epic in its sense, in itself, just to be on the moors in England. And in this amazing house. I don't even know if it's a house. So it's a manor is what it was. So anyhow, so very special. But the ability for the majority, and I mean the vast majority of people,
Sure.
to be able to pull that off and to be able to fly to England and every 2 months, or even if Franklyn was teaching in New York or someone else was teaching on the mainland, to fly from their hometown to, let's see if it's New York, to be able to afford housing in New York, be able to afford food in New York, and the cost of training, it's very prohibitive. It's one thing to go to an osteopathic college and have that ability and that mindset that you're going to become an osteopath, and ultimately that vast sum of money that you're going to need to do that will pay itself off because you'll be able to have a return from insurance and everything else. But we don't have that, unfortunately. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we don't have that ability to use third-party insurance to pay for our clients, patients to come and see us. So it's all word of mouth, most of it without insurance. So I wanted to create something that a dedicated, focused student with books could undertake and become successful. And that was my vision. And Michael and I created Craniosacral 1, Craniosacral 2, then TMJ, which was an extension of the hard palate, and our last one was spinal dynamics, and we're doing one on birthing. So it gave a focused student, somebody who really wanted to learn, the ability to learn. And I really believe that, because I can tell you, I don't want to bore you with testimonials, but they're on my website, and there's a couple of people that it's just stellar about home study. But I will tell you about one osteopath who studied, or two, but really one, so I don't waste a lot of time, who studied craniosacral therapy via osteopathy, and then did a course with a well-known person in the world, a 10-seminar course, and it's got a special deal because of translation abilities, who said that my videos, or our videos, Michael and I, were far superior to her training. Here's the bottom line around it. And I think there is no con to it. It's all pro. The only con is that you don't get to experience the loveliness of, like I did in England with 20 students, creating a field of practice.
Right.
And in that energy field. And it's hard to know what actually gets transmitted or transmuted under those circumstances. But most people don't have that ability to do that in the United States, Canada, and other parts of the world. So this format gave the person who was focused and dedicated, if they followed the training as it was prescribed, to do the work and to understand the work. Now, I always tell the students, you need, and I mean this, you need to go out and receive the work from somebody who is practicing craniosacral therapy and hopefully has some knowledge, because there's a lot of people who are practicing the work, and I hate to say this, but it's true in our industry, who really shouldn't be hanging that shingle. I mean, it's a big study, and most people, the majority of people don't put the time in. And how do I know? Because I've undergone trainings of 2 years, or taught training for 2 years. And after a year, and I watch my students, and it's my fault, but I watch my students doing a particular cranial hold, and they don't have it right. A simple thing like a sphenoid hold, they're not doing properly. And I'm like, oh my God, how is this possible? How could they have been studying with me for a year and don't know where to put their thumbs? That's my fault, I guess. But what it really is they don't practice. So you can go to, and I saw this in Franklyn's class with some of the students, you can go to a very expensive course, fly all over the world. And if you don't practice, you're not going to get the work, period. So the online home study gives a focused student the ability to learn the work. Because one of the things about a live class, and I know because I teach them, is that here's the technique. Okay, now the technique is over, practice it. And so they go home, and if they have a book that shows them the movement of the bones, great, they can look at that. But with the video, you can see just as it was taught in the class. There he is doing it again, or there she is doing it again. This is how the temporal bone moves. This is how your hands are. Now close your eyes or just stare at the computer to get this sense of feeling inside of you. You know, I play guitar, you know that. So if I played my guitar 15 minutes a week and I played in front of you, you'd be like, yeah, he's okay. Better keep his day job. But for somebody who practices 2, 3, 4 hours a day, you can see and hear, not see, you can hear that this person has taken the time to study the work. And I think the biggest charade and the biggest, unfortunately, fallacy and weakness in our group is that most people don't practice. I will send out a video to some, an email to some of the people who have purchased my deal. And I said, this is not about me making money. This is about telling you that if you've bought CST1 and you're practicing, and if you are practicing and you haven't bought CST2 or 3 yet, you are playing your guitar with 3 strings, and you cannot make music with 3. I mean, you can, but really most people can't. And so my issue with myself is making stuff available to people. That's the con, that's the downside, is that I make these videos available to people, and now the National Certifying Board has made it so easy, and that's a whole nother topic, to be certified or to get CEUs, when the majority of these people, they just don't know how to do the work. They don't get it. They haven't. Why? Because they haven't practiced. They haven't read. They haven't received the work. So to make a long story short, it's about taking the videos, following the teachings, turning the video off when I tell you to, practicing on 2 or 3 people, then coming back to the videos. And hopefully in that period of time, going to somebody who is competent to receive the work so you feel it in your system. So that was my concept of home study. Unfortunately, I have no way of knowing, but I also know that in my live classes, people are very inept as well, because they don't really want this. You have to want it. You know, it has to be your vision that this is a journey that will probably take an entire lifetime, and you're going to enjoy the journey the entire way. Not something you're doing because you need CEUs, or it's the hip thing to be doing. You can tell people, oh yeah, I've studied craniosacral therapy, and you don't even know what the sphenobasilar joint is, and you don't even know how it moves. Where does the falx cerebri attach? They don't know any of this stuff because they haven't taken the time to practice. So the good news is about a 2-year course is you do get inundated with a lot of information. But if you don't go home and practice it, it's no better than somebody who just opens a book and goes, okay, let me put my hands here, and doesn't, so long-winded. I don't know if you have questions, but
No.
you can also feel my little angst about, people that are doing the work but aren't practicing. And,
actually,
anyway.
I love that it's I wouldn't use the word long-winded. I love that you're detailed and passionate about it, actually, because this is kind of what I wanted to hear. Is like, what, because I know that you have not only got a rock solid background yourself through your studying, but you're also have a history of teaching in person, and you will again, I'm sure, in the future. And you've done this, you've created this home learning, this home study class. And so you've kind of got all of these pieces. Not everyone has that. And I think what I wanted to hear, what I was interested to hear, was how you would address, how do you address consistency and quality and excellence with someone that has never been seen, has never been, you've never had like live hands-on feedback when you're doing a session.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I mean, I think what you're saying is like, this really is ideal for people who are super motivated, who are self-starters, who are passionate about doing the work, and who want an inroad that is accessible. And you're absolutely right. I mean, gosh, the amount of money that some practitioners that I know of have spent in getting qualified, I'm like, wow, just an immense, and I know you and I have spoken about it, just what that was for you, because you're flying to England for one thing. plus all the travel, as you say. And you're right, that takes us out of reach of so many people. And the majority of people, right? Yeah. And we've got people all over the planet that would, I mean, I get passionate about that part, who would benefit from this work.
Oh, absolutely.
There's just no doubt about it. And I think, you said something was very idealistic when we started talking, which I actually mirror, which is, I think the planet would be a better place if the majority of people had access to craniosacral therapy. I think it's that significant, and it's that transformational.
That's a good segue point, if I may, into a topic that I think is kind of warm these days. And the problem with having an opinion, it's kind of like having that sphenoebasal joint. Everybody's got one. So as soon as you take a stand, you're immediately creating not necessarily confrontation or conflict, but you're creating an opposite. And I know in the field that there's this thing about distance healing with and calling it cranial. Now I have a little bit of a how do I say this? I wouldn't say an issue, but I guess let me say issue, and then that creates this conflict a little bit, or I'm taking a stand. To me, the lovely quality of any of the body work sessions is being touched. And even though the touch is light with cranial, there's this enveloping quality to it. You're holding this, as Franklyn called it, relational field, and the safe field, and the person at the deepest level feels you. Now, that's not to say that you can't project that. So I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. Larry Dossey made it very clear with double placebo studies that prayer in San Francisco affected outcomes in New York in hospitals. And Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and his morphogenic fields, I used to all of a sudden think, oh, my mother, and my mother would call. So that was that whole morphogenic concept of energy and thought, and at the speed of light. So I'm not saying that people should not do it. But for me, craniosacral therapy, the name of it, imbues a quality of an enveloping field that the practitioner can project and hold, that's close, and the actual physical touch. Now, I remember Franklyn doing work off of the body and showing how we're capable of doing that. So I'm not saying that that's not conceivable, but to me, it's like saying rolfing, that you can do distance rolfing. And I just don't believe you can. I think you have to have that ulna placed on that fascial envelope and a movement that the body feels. And I feel the same way about CST. That being said, I don't want to judge anyone. If they feel confident, comfortable, and it's effective doing craniosacral without being in the same space, projecting it in through the morphogenic fields, I say, go for it. It's whatever makes your journey joyful. And if people are finding it effective doing it at a distance, hey, I think it's great. For me, I just have never been drawn to distance healing. And I know people that are successful at it. I just like to be there, the juiciness of like they're laying on my table. They're coming because they know I care for them. They've heard that I'm a decent practitioner. There's hope for them. And then I create this space with my practitioner fulcrum. I project a field to start with, and then I enter with a prayer and I touch them. And to me, that's who I am with this craniosacral therapy. But that's, again, I'm not taking the stand that nobody else should do that, should do it differently. It's just me. And I hope I clarified that.
You totally did. And it's interesting because when I came to ask you these questions about at-home learning, I could probably say the same thing. I mean, I came on it, if I'm really honest, and I was the whole time before we were talking, I'm like, okay, like where come into that place of neutrality and openness and curiosity, because I recognize some of the places within myself that were getting yeah, that were just lighting up a little bit. And for me, it's actually not about can someone do the work after watching the videos, because I think they absolutely can. And so this is just kind of off the record wrapping for a moment here. But, and this comes up in-person teaching as well, it's not different. But, I have some questions just generally around giving any individual on the planet a license to touch. I think it's a pretty intimate permission slip, and not just physically intimate. And as a woman, that comes up for me. But so, within the field of work, even highly reputable teachers of the work, yourself massively excluded. But, I get reports from other practitioners about inappropriate touch or inappropriate boundary lines, inappropriate energetic boundary lines. So then when you come to people just going online and ordering something and then putting up a shingle and going, now I'm a craniosacral practitioner, let me come into your physical presence and field. So where I question, and it's no different than if somebody attends a course in person, because you still don't have a way of evaluating professionalism and integrity at that level. And that's a whole other question.
Well,
that didn't touch on the distance stuff, which I definitely, would love to share my thought on at some point.
But to answer that, I think that's an important question, but I agree. But the problem is you can't police that. I saw things when I was teaching that absolutely blew me away, that a married man could have behaved in the manner that he did 6 weeks away from being certified and having spent $10,000 on his education. I mean, the drive, the energetic biological drive is so strong, but we can't police that. You can take these ethic courses, which they make you take, to keep your licensure, but that's a joke. I mean, they made me take that every 2 or 3 years, and I've been practicing 25 years without any, without ever crossing the line. But that's a whole certification. All that's a whole nother story. But I get you on that. It's a problem, unfortunately, with humans. It's a very powerful drive, and integrity. And this is what I told my students. I hope this is appropriate for this interview, but when I was teaching Rolfing, and so I would say to my students, look, say the male students, if a good-looking woman comes in, or you find good-looking comes into your practice, there's nothing wrong with admitting that to yourself. She's attractive. I said, that's part of our biological inheritance. But the curtain comes down when you make the decision and she's on your table, you become a professional, period. And if you can't manage that, then get out. And I would, with that tone of voice. And I would say the same thing to women. So it's part of our profession, unfortunately, but you see it in every profession. Men and women cross the line continually all over the planet. So I feel like a practitioner just has to have a very strong ethos around sexuality in their profession. And I also told them, hey, you may meet somebody that becomes your lifetime partner, but just, make that decision that there's no money exchanges and you want to date and you're attracted to each other. But, there's some circumstances I don't think a person should deal with, especially with their students. But with clients, that could be divine providence. But I think you have to have integrity around that. And so that's my feeling. I don't worry about it at all. I preached it when I was teaching, but at this point I realize humans are kind of a weird species. And when it comes to sex, they are really weird. It's a very strong drive, very strong drive. And we came from the same, or you're still there, but yeah, Paramahansa Yogananda was, and I think I told you the story about that when I was 15. That was my first introduction to the, oh wow, that there's spirituality. And I think Paramahansa Yogananda would say, or maybe I'm wrong, but all of them would say that, that you have to learn to channel that energy and appropriately, especially when you touch people. So I get you. I totally get you, and I understand that. The thing about learning online or learning at home, I made it really difficult for people to get certification. Very difficult, but I was totally overruled by the National Certifying Board. Now it's like You just look at the videos, take a test, and I could go into that. That's a whole other story. So I got to a point where I can't worry about it. It's like I'm not in control of this planet and people. I'm just in control of my own emotions and thought processes. So what happens outside of with my videos, I can't do anything about it. So I gave that up a long time ago.
No, it's good. It's good, Judah, and thanks for addressing that. And you know what, you make really good points. And I think, you know, when I was first thinking about that, I made a couple of notes beforehand of like, you know, what are my sort of pre-existing, just like, you know, cautionary questions. And I came to pretty much the same place, which is no matter whether you're doing at-home learning or in-person classes and trainings, we're just a strange species in regard to the energy of intimacy. And there really is no, as you say, there's no way to police that. And
Yeah.
it's going to happen. And really the best that I could imagine doing is, as you've said, which is really just to have that be part of your training. So
Yeah.
that the subject is brought up, so that it's under discussion, and so that there's at least you know, a discussion around ethics. And then also at some point is to you know, just to continue educating clients as to what to expect. You know,
Yes.
part of it is empowering clients rather than have them go in you know, sort of with the practitioner on this sort of professional pedestal. So the
Right.
clients know like what to expect, what's appropriate touch, and so on. So, and
Absolutely.
that's a whole different subject, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know about my videos, what people are doing with them. I have no idea because we've sold thousands of them all over the planet. But my hope is that people actually do the work and actually are impacted. I'm more interested really at some level, and I don't sell them that way because people want to learn how to do the work, but I'm more interested in its impact on them as individuals and how it impacts their life. Because in order to do it, you have to cultivate stillness.
Yes.
And that's the big hoop you have to jump through. And when you with the portal, I like maybe not hoop, but a portal that has to open that you walk through is this idea of creating stillness and how it permeates your entire existence. How you're standing in line at a grocery store and a little baby being held by the mother turns around and looks at you and holds you in a trance-like way because somehow, and it's not, I hope it doesn't sound arrogant because there's nothing special about it, doesn't make us special, but I think it's because we play in that field that the baby is aware that we're emanating some kind of energy that is attractive. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. The mother keeps turning around because the baby's still looking at me, or, you know, it's just when you cultivate stillness through meditation and thought process, I think it's the greatest cultivating tool to becoming a practitioner. Not putting your hands in a particular place, because 10 people can put their hands in a particular hold and feel 10 different things, unfortunately or fortunately. I don't even think it's about that. I think it's about how we place our hands on the nervous system in this fluid matrix, this liquid crystalline matrix, and how people begin to resonate and how it impacts both fields, the practitioner and the client patient. So that was really my idea. You know, I wanted to make money, obviously, too. I would be a liar if I said otherwise, but it impacted me so deeply, the concept of the practitioner fulcrum, and you know, coming back to that when my mind wandered, and visualizing movement in my spine and projecting and holding a field, 2 or 3 different fields, and then feeling the information that came in. It was a game changer. It was a life-changing event for me. And then you do it enough times during a day, and it's like, oh wow, this is cool. This is very cool. I like this. And I love Rolfing, and people love Rolfing, but I hope the Rolfers aren't, they're going to shoot me. But to me, craniosacral therapy is so deep. I mean, what's cool is like Charles Swenson, who was my first teacher, who was my anatomy teacher at the Rolf Institute, he told me something with great wisdom after studying with Franklyn himself. He said, you know, it's changed my Rolfing, but not the touch. So, well, the touch too, but it's the information that comes through your touch as a Rolfer that was cultivated and nurtured by the cranial wave. because you begin to feel the wave under the fascia or through the fascia. So you can feel the difference in one leg to the other. Wow, this is getting more fluid in it than the other one. Maybe I should work on this one more. So it's a very, as you know, it's a very transformative work. I used to bother myself by thinking, I wonder, people out there are doing my videos, what are they really doing? Are they doing them? Are they putting their hands on people? And so every year I'll say, hey, if you're only doing Cranios CST1, if you're still practicing and you haven't gone somewhere else to look at other materials, you're playing your guitar with 3 strings. Look at the other materials. This was a journey. And that, I don't take them to the mat and, make them buy anything. It's just, I do my best to get the people who are buying them to try to see us as a joyful but very serious journey, to embody what it takes to become a professional, whether it's a musician, an artist.
Right. And I think you said this earlier, and I think it's, perhaps one of the most beautiful elements that you shared is like, really, this is a lifetime undertaking. This is a lifetime path, a true path. And I say true path
Absolutely.
because it has depth to it. It has reality to it. And that field that you speak about is the deepest meeting that we can have, I think, personally. And that's why babies respond to it. It's why animals respond to it, because it's that field of consciousness that is the ground of our being. And how blessed are we that we get to work in it. And I think, with my training with my teacher, that was really the starting point in the work. Was we met in silence, we met in stillness until the group field arose. And
Nice.
we wouldn't even begin the training until we were in group field. You
Nice.
wouldn't even begin a phone call till we were in group field. Which, back then, and not knowing him at all and not knowing what the field was at that time, that was a really unusual experience to have someone who is on the phone with you and doesn't even speak because they're waiting until you drop into the same place. And then you meet there. Yeah, like the beautiful verse of Rumi. And in my case, and again, this is a little off the record, but in my case, at the same time I was studying cranial work with Wes Vaught, who was my teacher, beautiful man. He'd been in spiritual community for decades with an awakened master. And at the same time that I was studying with him, I had just recently met an awakened master living on this island he was Christ-like. It was extraordinary to be in his presence. I didn't know anyone like that, even existed on the planet.
Yeah, that's lovely.
It is. It really is. And actually, the greatest gift he gave me ever was telling me he wasn't my teacher after 6 months.
Yeah.
And that was what led me onto Yogananda and his teaching. And so I think the way I approach cranial work is probably quite different than it would have been without having those influences. When you speak about, and I don't have a hard and fast around this one, because I think the term craniosacral therapy definitely has, that essence of touch is so much part of it. Of course, it has been since the get-go. And when Wes was talking about his coming into the work himself, my teacher, he shared that, in the early days, it was much closer to osteopathy. He said the forces that were inherent in the craniosacral work that he studied with Hugh Milne. So he studied in that whole sort of visionary approach to cranial work. But he said that when he first came into the work, it was very much closer to osteopathy. And gradually over the course of his training and practice, it, as you shared with Franklyn, it got to the point where they'd be working off the body in the field and still feeling the same forces, still feeling the same tide, still feeling the same fluid movement. And I just offer this not to try to change a perspective, but just to offer a personal reflection, I guess, from myself, from my experience, which is years ago now, somebody walked into session with me who was going through intense grief. And in a way, I felt like it was a tremendous blessing, because what I went through at the passing of my mother was the most extreme manifestation of grief that I could imagine. But having worked with that individual, I had watched somebody come into my space who was in such a deep state of grief that her field was shattering in front of me. When I say her field, I mean her energy field, her vibrational.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that there was nothing. I mean, of course, in cranial work, you're not adding anything anyways. Certainly in biodynamic work, quite the opposite. You're holding space, right? You're not adding anything. But in her case, I couldn't even add touch. She was so fragile vibrationally. It was like watching somebody shatter holographically in front of my eyes. And we were just sat across a table speaking to each other at that point. And I just intuitively knew that we were going to have to do session without touch because it would be more than she could actually hold space for. And that entire session took place across the room in a way that completely blew both of our minds. Wasn't something I'd ever thought about or conceptualized or imagined possible, but it was the only way to work with her in a way that she could tolerate because she was so fragile. And so, you know, from that and a number of other similar experiences over the years, you know, I've taken perhaps a brave or a curious leap, I think, into seeing just, you know, craniosacral is on a spectrum, I think. You know, you go from Rolfing to cranial work, you're very far apart in terms of pressure, right?
Say.
Couldn't be further apart in terms of physical input, right?
You're
And
right.
my guess is that, you know, whether we choose to give it a different name at some point or not, I'm not attached to the name, but my sense from coming into it through this field of consciousness, both through Yogananda's work and through my first spiritual teacher or mentor, is that we're on a spectrum, and at some point that spectrum is going to become more and more refined. So, you know, in this last year, what I've discovered is working with clients in various other locations is you can still feel the tides. Your hands still respond to that. The holding field of that compassionate presence that is so nourishing is thick and womb-like at distance in a way that actually feels magnified. And I don't know if that's because you have to bring a greater depth of presence to the work. You don't have anything else but your presence to work with because you don't have, you know, the sort of the crutch in a way of physical contact. And that's just my word, which could feel loaded. But there's nothing else you can bring to it except for subtle perception and the field of the heart and that perceptive field of just holding the possibility of being able to perceive fluid movement and even physical movement at distance. So I don't say that to try to convince. I don't say that to try to, you know, even say that it should be called cranial. I created another term for the way I work, which is subtle field therapy, which I kind of umbrella everything under, and cranial work is sort of blended with that. But just I offer it as out of curiosity. If you're ever, you know, ever in a position where you wish, gosh, we're still locked down, and I would love to be able to show up.
Well, I'm certainly up for trying it. And I would tell you, I've said this about Reiki. You know, people can do Reiki training in 4 days. And then, you know, I always thought it's just funny that they became masters in the term master. But I said, ultimately, it's probably the highest form of healing. So you have to embody an energetic concept or quality and have a certain amount, obvious, of acumen in order for people to get well, having no real touch. And distance healing, people have been doing it for years, absolutely effectively. I think it's great that you're doing it. And in some ways, it, you know, again, maybe one of the ultimate forms, a higher form, because of the frequency that's necessary in order to pull it off and be successful. And the truth is, who cares what we call it? I mean, I was just observing like a fly on the wall, the kind of the back and forth between people in the industry. about this. And again, my feeling is CST has a particular model. But here's what happens, in my opinion, is that as your frequency changes, which it does, there's, I don't know if it's a higher frequency, I assume it is, the depth of your projection is unlimited. So the fact that there's somebody on the planet that you're communicating with and you hold, it's just a larger space. You know, we have the biosphere, the midfield, and the wide field. Well, it's just a really wide field. You know, if you have an image of them, or you don't even have an image of them, if you can manage to tune in, it's just, to me, a higher form of healing. And I think your naming of it that way doesn't make me feel better today. She's saying that she's doing cranial dissonance. You know, that I just don't roll that way. I don't care what people do. You know, and as long as they're not evil. I can't even care about evil anymore. But I think the fact that what you've named it makes a lot of sense to me. I think that obviously your training and is an evolutionary process. Mine certainly has been. And the fact that you are capable of getting beneficial responses says it all to me. Who cares what you call it? We're here. Our job, our journey is to help people, is to create more wellness in their lives at whatever level we're capable of doing, or whatever level they're capable of receiving. So I don't feel like you're trying to, you know, change me at all, because I've always believed in distance healing. I just don't practice it. I've thought about it, you know, what would that be like to do that? But the truth is, there's something about having people, you know, under my hands that I appreciate. And at this point in my life, you know, unless somebody said, hey, you know, would you try this? You know, I think it's great that you're doing it. And I think it's great that you're doing it successfully. That's all that counts. I mean, we know it works because as I said before in the conversation, Larry Dossey's done double-blind placebo studies with people praying in San Francisco for people who have been operated on in New York, and the morphogenic field work by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. We know that this works. It's just what you decide to tune into. And I think it's great that you're capable. It doesn't surprise me that you're successful at it either. So
and you know what? Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And what I think is interesting with this, because we know the role of intention with energy.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely potent. And what's so interesting, and maybe just interesting and curiosity are the two words that I find most valuable when you think about discussing the evolution, if it is an evolution, of cranial into a hands-free modality, is that in every other form of distance healing work that I can think of, there's a transmission element. And in our work, in cranial work, it's quite the reverse, actually. How I think of it is you're holding a space for somebody's field to do its own work, and you're there as a witnessing presence to that. Right. And in the distance cranial work, it's the same. There's no transmission element whatsoever. You're letting their field come to you, and you're feeling the difference between the left leg and the right leg, and the weightedness and the movement of the rhythm and the unwinding at the hip. And all of that is taking place here at distance. And to me, if nothing else, it's just fascinating.
That's very cool.
It's just a curiosity and an unexpected inquiry that I think, you know, will probably, as with everything else, continue on for a long time.
And the other thing is, you know, we're living in the last 2 years or whatever it's been an astoundingly powerful wave of change on the planet. Maybe, you know, this whole healing movement will go in that direction, that people will be effective at distance, which would be so cool. Great.
You know, I think like with everything, it's like, let's just watch this space. Let's keep the integrity of it. And I've made a point of too close to any of those conversations, because I think there's so much polarity anyway on the planet. Last thing we need is that within our work. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
If you're doing effective work, your clients are going to let you know whether it's useful or not. If it's not, they're going to disappear pretty darn quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. I think that's awesome that you've moved in that, you've moved in that direction. I mean, there's talk of by location, and who knows what we're capable of. Who would have thought in the 1860s, sitting around a campfire, that somebody had this wild idea about a smartphone being able to have a conversation, or this box with all these keys on it, that somebody could have a conversation in one person's in Hawaii and in real time in Nha, Vietnam, having a conversation at this level. I mean, it's a fascinating time to be human, and it always has been, but who knows where we're going with this? I mean, who knows?
We're here to witness miracles, Judah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, maybe one of these days, Bridie, I'll be able to visit you in the Hawaiian Islands again if you're still there.
We follow the tide, right?
Yes.
Follow the tide. Judah, I'm so thrilled that we got to visit this way. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. Let's do it again.
Thank you so much for showing up for the
Thank you.
Judah. I super appreciate it. I've loved everything you've shared. You've definitely like erased a whole bunch of question marks that I had. I feel like you've got a super grounded relationship with what you've created and why and how.
Well, nice to see your smiling face. So let's stay in touch. Have a good one.
You guys take great care.
Thank you.
Warmest aloha. Namaste.
Bye-bye now.